Hello, and today I would like to talk about something in which is a little bit off, but given that the fact that the Trump administration is beginning the process of transition for the Biden administration, I would like to discuss issues that are currently present. And those issues are in terms of America's downfall. So, before I get into all of this, I do understand that Trump is still fighting legal battles, and that's important to keep your eyes out for. For example, he sent an appeal towards the Pennsylvania courts to go up to the next level up about election fraud that's currently there. This is also going to be pushed throughout into different states as well, for example, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, etc. But it is most likely seems to be the end of times if they're willing to allow these transition process to occur, and the times being for the Trump administration. So let me highlight how we got to this point right now. I'm going to do 3, maybe 4 main points to highlight this, and then kind of where we can go as the American public from here on out. So when we're looking at it, I think America is the greatest country to have ever blessed the planet, and this is because I believe we brought the most amount of freedom for individuals and prosperity across the country. Now, is that to say, because people will make the counterpoint that, oh, you have done X to this country and that is terrible, is that to say that America is perfect? No, America has had its faults. Just looking at our founding. When you look over, we started with the Articles of Confederation, which those didn't end up being that good because there's not enough power towards the federal government. Not to say that the federal government should have all the power, but it was too weak to really unify all of us. So here we are as a whole, in which we had the Bill of Rights, which led to we have a constitution, all this jazz now, in which we have what the American government was. And this was going great. And coming into the 1900s, we see in America the greatest country in the world and the biggest superpower, even if it wasn't exactly known. But the first hiccup started to appear early into the 1900s. And this comes in form in 1913, I believe, with the 17th Amendment. And let me just double check. Yes, the 17th Amendment. And this is when we saw a change. And this change came in forms of allowing voters to choose for their senator instead of having state legislators. And the reason why I'm highlighting this one as the first issue is because what we're going away from is a representative democracy and more into a true democracy, which is easily corruptible. And by this I mean, when the state legislators are picked, they're picked again among the people. We will vote on who we wish to have represent us, and then we vote for them, and they will decide off of their will what they wish to do. And then that often means, again, one of them was picking the state senators. And this was also to help keep states autonomous as well from the federal government, to have a separation of powers, to allow the states to express themselves more. But with that gone, and we changed it to a popular vote due to the 17th Amendment, well, now states have lost a lot more powers. And there's been a push ever since then, for example, to remove the Electoral College so that states no longer have powers that are equal to the federal government, but instead states are beneath the federal government. It's a lot easier to control from a top down than from a side-by-side system. So the 17th Amendment was the starting steps of it, and it makes sense it happened around this time because if you look worldwide, that's when socialism was really taking root. There was an idea that there was going to be a socialist revolution and that the bourgeois would fall on down and the proletariat would rise on up. Well, what we saw though was that it really only happened towards Russia and then later China, and well, look what happened to Russia, for example. It kind of collapsed, but that's besides the point. That was the first real issue that sprung up. And from there, because that we did not see the socialist revolution, many of the socialists got together, for example, in the Frankfurt School, and they discussed how can we perhaps make this end up differently. We didn't see the rise that we wanted to out of the workers, and we still believe that this is the way to go. How can we change it? And their idea came in the form of changing both the culture and the education. Now, the reason why you want to do education is so that way you can change the impressionable minds of the youth into having a different direction than they normally would. That they were not informed enough of the greatness of socialism and that they had to be taught. So that was one route. The other was culturally. So whenever you watch a TV show, as you're watching and spending a lot of time into that, you grow connected to the characters. And then if a character acts out in a certain way, then you feel as if, all right, you know what? I like that character and they view it this way. I agree with that. That's the general philosophy behind it, right? It's more of a hive mind type approach. And so they want to approach those two different routes. If you change the culture and you change education, then you can change the base to believe what you want. So that's what they did. And that's when the second issue comes into form, which is throughout the 60s and 70s, what we see for our culture and education. McCarthy was right back in the 40s and 50s that there was very much a red, in-depth look and a entrenchment into America's foundations. And that's again culture and education, and that they infiltrated Hollywood and they infiltrated the universities, and then they were trying to change everything. Now maybe his approach was a little bit too brash for people's sake, but he did show that they were trying to come in. And now as we see today, they're firmly within the university systems, which is a behemoth of disgusting socialist rot. And within Hollywood, which is probably, if not one of the most sickest and demented groups of people and elite, it's definitely up there in the top 10. So, even though McCarthy was right, he ended up failing. In the 60s and 70s, we really saw them get entrenched. And nowadays, look at every single university. Most of these professors have never worked. They've only ever taught throughout their whole lives. Also, besides just having these professors only teaching for their whole lives, what you also have is that all of our entertainment that we watch, for the most part, is very much washed down now. Take, for example, the NFL. The ESPN used to only be about sports, believe it or not, but now they get on their high horse and they preach to you and me saying, hey, you should be better. Well, okay, I don't want to watch that in my sports, so I'm going to go flick on over and let's go see this in, oh, cool. There's now this movie telling me how bad of a person I am. Sometimes it's more on the nose. For example, even though I love this movie, Us by Peele, or also in other movies as well, right? Spike Lee is another person which has a lot of social commentary. One of the better movies of, I believe, 2019 was Parasite. I love that movie. It was a really good movie, but very much heavy-handed. Not saying that art can't have metaphors and themes, but when that's the only thing you get is this progressive speaking from your high horse consistently. Not just in terms of movies, which some movies have beautiful art. I love Parasite. I think that's beautiful. I think that was very well done, even if I don't agree with the message. But if we're talking not just movies, but TV shows, and then it goes down into our sports, NFL, basketball with LeBron James, it's an all entertainment. That's why I found a beak in the UFC. Or sure, maybe I don't agree with Tyrone Woodley, but seeing him and Colby Covington fight, that's a blast. Because at least there, I get to see two people duke it out, two people with conflicting views. It's fine. You know, maybe they're not duking out over words, but at least they can say their own views, but then they're able to fight it out. It's not muddied down in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't feel like it's being pushed on me. But hopefully that helps kind of push the narrative that the culture and the education systems have collapsed. And that was my second point. And the third point is the fall of the Republican Party. So let's take, for example, this. The founding of the Republican Party came back into the 1800s, in which it was a party against slavery. The Democrat Party, the same one nowadays, is very much the party of the racists and still is. And yet, the Republican Party came out and they fought against it. We had a whole civil war dedicated to it. And of course, there's other things in the Civil War. I'm making this black and white when there is shades of gray. But in either case, the Republican Party fought against slavery. And then we keep progressing through. The Republican Party tried to push for keeping things as free as possible. A lot of people construe that if the Republican Party isn't fighting for it at a federal level, then they must not want it. For example, take for that some Republicans, and this is true, but I don't think they should have ever been a Republican, but this is how the Republican Party fell. Some Republicans never wanted gay marriage to happen because of their beliefs. Now, the main thing, though, is I would say a majority of Republicans never want gay marriage to be a thing in terms of a federal level, is because it sets a precedent, and that is the government is now intertwined with marriage, when the government should never be intertwined with marriage. But, we're just the homophobic bigots that we are, right? So we had these issues that come up. And all right, so the Republican Party, though, started off really nice, right? And they kept going strong and kept pushing and pushing. Well, you compare it to the Democrat Party of, let's say, LBJ, who said that you would have the black vote for the next 200 years. I say black vote over the N-word, even though he did say it with the N-word. But all right, you had George Wallace, a mentor to the disgusting pedophile and Bill Clinton, be there and teach him, and he was very much a racist. Very much a racist, but again, that's fine. Republican Party, though, slowly became more and more corrupt. Sure, you had within the 80s, you had the Reagan conservatives, and Reagan, for the most part, was a really good president, but then the Republican Party got muddled. George Bush Sr. was a nobody that no one really cared about, but more along the lines of, let's say, a moderate, in my opinion. But then you had his sons. You had George Bush Jr., who was very much a neoconservative, but I would consider him a moderate in many regards. He was very much middle of the road. He pushed a lot of agendas that I don't agree with, such as the Patriot Act. Then, as we go through, we had McCain, who is very much a Democrat in name, for my opinion, and Mitt Romney, which is we're seeing nowadays. He is a Democrat. He flip-flops. He'll help out the Democrats if it benefits him. He is not a Republican. He is not a principled man. So you have these two people in which they have a lot of issues becoming the face of the Republican Party. Then we move into 2016, and you had a few actual Republicans come out, true conservatives, but they didn't make it. Ted Cruz did put up an excellent run, but he fell down to the wayside, and we had Donald J. Trump, who was very much not acting professionally. Now, yes, Donald J. Trump, looking back, hindsight 2020, and not speaking from a 2016 perspective, was a pretty damn good president. I agree with a lot of things he did. I wish that he would have pushed school choice more. I wish he would have pushed against China even harder. And I highly wish that he would have cut down on spending. But he has an amazing foreign policy track record. He did cut down on regulations. And he has done a lot of good. And he was still fighting against China. Just not as much as I wish. Because I believe they're the greatest evil on earth. But still, you had Donald Trump do a lot of good. But his issue was that he was a populist. He didn't win over all the Republicans at the start and showed that a populist could win. And when he's going against Hillary Clinton, it's not much of a issue at all. And now we're into 2020, where the Republican Party is not fully behind Trump. Yes, more and more people are coming out and speaking against the election fraud that is happening currently, or so perceived election fraud. And now Donald Trump is fighting against it, but the Republican Party is a shell of what it was, the principles that they held. And now they're just going against whatever helps them get elected. The politicians, for the most part, have abandoned the core values of what made the Republican Party and this country great. And that is the third issue, the abandonment of the principles that made us great. Yes, you do have a few great senators out there, such as Ted Cruz or even Rand Paul. And again, I'm not saying I agree with them across the board on everything, but they believe in the founding principles. And that is now gone in terms of people which are populist, which are terms of people that have their own agenda. Lindsey Graham is one of them. For every good that he's done, fighting, going to bat for, say, the Supreme Court nominations, he has done bad. Same thing in terms of McConnell. These people have done some good, but often they have been very much establishment people, a part of the swamp. And Trump helped highlight that. He helped, one of the greatest achievements he ever did was help highlight how bad our political system is and how we as Americans are the ones getting the raw end of the deal. Because we are the ones forced to watch these great people up in Congress duke it out between each other in a verbal battle as we sit there dazed and confused. And when everything is said and done, because of these three issues, look at where America is now. The country is in shambles. There are riots all across every major city, for example, over social issues that many people just abuse so they can get their own free loot. We are entering a time where America's prosperity is going to crumble and that China will be taken over as a superpower. And it won't be like where America leaves the country after they've entered. Say what you will, but at least America leaves. You think China's going to leave once they've submitted Hong Kong, Taiwan? What happens when they start looking past around them towards Japan, Korea, the Philippines, into deeper and deeper Asia? The Uyghur Muslims, which many Democrats won't even speak out against, right? Even though they are being slaughtered. And that's the hypocrisy of the Democrats, but that's a different point. But even the Uyghur Muslims, they'll end up being anyone that speaks out against their oppression. And that's the issue that we have. Is that in America, we have collapsed so far, and I don't know if it's reversible at this point or not, but hope to God it is. Because if America goes away, then the next person to take the reins is going to be China. And that is not good for you, and that's not good for me, that's not good for any American citizen. But our heads are too far up our own collective asses to realize that. So, hopefully, Trump has some kraken, so to speak, that he can release and show that there is election fraud. Otherwise, we're going to have a Chinese puppet within the presidency in Joe Biden. And it's a shame, too, because America is the greatest country that has ever blessed the planet. But America will eventually have to fall sometime. And this is not the time to go down when there's not another America behind. So, anyways, thank you for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them down below. Please leave a like and please do subscribe. Anyways, God bless America.